Have you ever wondered what it feels like to carry scars no one can see? To stand tall when the world tries to tear you down? Meet Raina Jefferson, a woman who survived the flames of war only to face a different kind of battle in a small-town diner. Her story isn't just about enduring cruelty, it's about reclaiming dignity with quiet courage, turning pain into power, and reminding us all that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they pour your coffee, listen to your story, and fight for justice in silence, until the moment they refuse to stay invisible. Step into her world and let her resilience touch your heart. She turned slowly. "Sir, I'm working," she said, her tone crisp but level, carrying a quiet authority that didn't ask for respect. It expected it. Travis, still holding his phone aloft like a trophy, smirked and leaned back, recording. "Come on now, don't be shy. Show the folks what a real war hero looks like." More chuckles. Elliot snorted again. But there was an edge to it now, a forced quality, like he could feel the tension thickening in the air. Raina didn't flinch. She didn't give him a smile. What she gave him was silence, heavier than any insult. A silence earned from things seen, done, and survived. Silence that used to follow gunfire and broken bones. Caleb watched it all. And now he wasn't just watching. He was remembering. Fallujah, the burning sky, the frantic screams on comms. The woman covered in dust and blood, dragging men twice her size from twisted wrecks. They used to call her KJ because she didn't want the enemy knowing her name. And when the Humvee went up in a fireball, they thought she was gone with it. They mourned her. Buried a helmet and boots in her name. And yet here she was, burned, yes, but unbroken, pouring coffee in a diner for men who didn't deserve the ground she walked on. Across the room, Miguel Torres, the diner manager, stepped out from the back with a tray of fresh dishes in hand. His eyes swept the floor, catching the frozen posture at table 7. The phone pointed at Raina, the way she was standing just a bit too still. Miguel's jaw tightened. He set the tray down behind the counter and moved toward them. "Everything okay here, Raina?" he asked, his voice low but firm, the kind that didn't tolerate nonsense. "Just fine," she said, still watching Travis, still calculating. "Sir, I'm going to ask you to put the phone away," Miguel said to Travis, his tone sharpening. Travis scoffed, not even glancing at him. "Public space, buddy. I can record whatever I want." "Not in my restaurant, you can't," Miguel said coolly. "You've been warned before." That got Travis's attention. He lowered the phone just slightly and narrowed his eyes. "You siding with her now? She one of your charity hires or something?" "She's a veteran," Miguel said without hesitation. "And she's twice the human you'll ever become." The laughter at the booth stopped altogether. Elliot shifted in his seat, glancing between Travis and Miguel. The two corporate suits looked suddenly fascinated with their pancakes. Travis grinned, but it was all teeth. "You know what? I think it's time I had a little chat with your regional manager. Pretty sure Langdon and Crane keep this place in business." Miguel didn't blink and blink. "Feel free, but until then, you can finish your meal or leave." There was a moment, brief but loaded, where it looked like Travis might escalate. Caleb was already halfway out of his booth, his instincts coiled. But then Travis gave a cold little laugh and leaned back again. "Touchy crowd today," he muttered. Raina turned without another word and walked away. Caleb watched her disappear into the kitchen and felt the last few minutes simmer behind his ribs like an old wound. He hadn't seen her die, but he'd believed she had. And now she was back, not with a bang, but in a place like this, with people like them, humiliated in daylight by men who wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes where she'd served. He stood and crossed the diner, his footsteps soft but sure. Miguel met his eyes briefly as he passed. No words, just a flicker of mutual understanding. Caleb paused outside the kitchen door. He didn't knock, just waited. After a beat, Raina stepped out, wiping her hands on a towel, eyebrows raised in a silent question. "I'm not here to blow your cover," he said softly, "but I needed to know." Raina's expression didn't shift. "And now that you do?" Caleb looked at her, really looked, at the scarred skin, the way she stood like a soldier off duty, but never at ease. "Now I want to help," he said, "if you'll let me." Something flickered in her eyes, not trust, too early for that, but the faintest pause. "You remember what happened to our unit?" "Every name, every loss." Raina nodded once. Then you know this fight isn't over. Not for me, not yet. He nodded back. I'm in. Neither of them smiled. There was nothing to smile about. But something shifted between them, something heavy that neither of them had asked for, but both had carried for too long. Back at the booth, Travis was muttering under his breath and scrolling through his phone, likely posting clips and hashtags, never imagining the storm that was about to come. Because what Raina Jefferson had endured was only part of the story, and Caleb Hartman had just joined her for the rest. Working exactly. A smirk curled across Travis Langdon's face, his phone angled just enough to catch Raina in frame. Work that charm, baby. Or do I need to start tipping based on skin tone? His words dropped like a brick in the diner's air, flat and toxic. Even Elliot Crane, usually eager to laugh at anything crude, hesitated. The humor faltered. Raina approached their booth without missing a beat. Her posture was steady, her fingers coiled tightly around the notepad, calm, composed but alert, like a wire stretched to its limit. Mr. Langdon, she said, her voice soft but unwavering, if you keep recording me without my consent, I'm going to have to ask you to stop. Travis barked a laugh. You'll have to what? You work here. You don't get to tell me anything. Actually, a voice cut in from behind the counter. Miguel Torres, the manager, had appeared, arms crossed, calm as ever, but his eyes sharp. Texas law says otherwise. Travis turned toward him, incredulous. Excuse me? One-party consent for recordings, Miguel said coolly. But harassment? That's a whole different story. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't moved from his spot. But there was something in his tone, unshakable, final, the kind of tone that didn't need to ask twice. Travis scoffed, dismissive, and waved him off like a nuisance. Then he turned back to his phone. Come on, Raina, don't be like that. Just smile for the camera. That's all you're good for anyway. That was when it happened. Across the aisle, a sharp cough interrupted the tension. A man in his late 60s hunched forward in the booth, a hand flying to his throat. His wife sprang up, panic flooding her eyes. The man gasped, wheezed, struggled for air. His face flushed dark red. He stood, staggered. Raina didn't hesitate. Her notepad hit the floor with a thud as she crossed the room in 2 swift strides. Sir, can you breathe? She asked, already at his side, eyes locked on his face, hands assessing his condition with practiced speed. He shook his head violently. I'm performing the Heimlich, she said clearly. Her arm slid into place behind him, anchoring beneath his rib cage. 1, 2. On the third thrust, a chunk of sausage flew from his mouth onto the floor. The man collapsed back into the booth, gasping, chest heaving. Applause spread through the diner, uncertain at first, then earnest. A moment of awe made louder by the silence that came before it. Raina didn't react to the clapping. She placed 2 fingers on the man's wrist, checking his pulse with gentle efficiency. You're okay, she murmured. Just breathe slow. Let it settle. His wife gripped Raina's hand, tears lining her eyes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Raina gave a quiet nod and stood. Travis's phone had lowered. Elliot's too. Even Caleb, who had already known who she was, looked like he'd seen her in a new light. Raina turned toward Miguel. I'll comp their meal, he said quietly. She nodded once, then pivoted to face the booth where Travis and Elliot sat frozen. Her posture was different now, taller, controlled. The stillness around her wasn't just composure, it was command. Gentlemen, she said, voice crisp, do you still require anything else? Travis opened his mouth, but no words came. His lips twitched once, then stilled. I didn't think so, she said with a thin, razor-sharp smile. Then she walked away. Caleb rose from his seat and intercepted her near the counter. That was textbook, he said, his voice low, laced with something between admiration and memory. Clinical. Perfect form. Raina glanced at him. 3 tours. You don't forget. He paused, then gently. You were KJ. I still am, she replied, her voice quiet. Not many people know. Why didn't you ever say anything? Would they have listened? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence said it all. You died, he said at last. I disappeared. The fire took everything. No papers, No proof, just scars. Caleb stood still, processing it all. I saw you run into the smoke. You never came back. We all thought, he swallowed hard. I thought you were gone. She looked at him then, really looked. Her eyes were weary but unyielding. Parts of me were. Miguel approached from the counter. Everything okay over here? Raina gave a small nod. For now. Miguel's eyes shifted toward Caleb. You're not with them, are you? God, no. Good, I like my floorboards blood-free. Raina almost smiled. Then Travis's voice rose again, piercing the moment. You know what this place really needs? New waitresses, ones without Frankenstein arms. The room froze. All eyes turned. Raina took a breath. Steady. Back to work, she said. Caleb lingered beside her. They won't stop. I know. So what's the play? She glanced over her shoulder. You'll see. And just like that, she moved again, straight into the storm. Not with her head down, not as a victim, as a strategist. Caleb watched her approach the next table, her motions smooth and grounded. She took their order, calm, precise, unshakable. And then she smiled. Not for them, for herself, because the campaign had just begun. Travis Langdon hated silence, unless he was the one causing it. So when his latest barb failed to stir laughter, failed even to earn a smirk from Elliot, he shifted uncomfortably in his booth. Something had changed, something beyond the Heimlich rescue, beyond Raina's quiet power. She hadn't just saved a man's life. She'd reminded everyone in the room of something they'd forgotten. Authority. Caleb leaned on the counter watching her. She was wiping down a table near the windows now, her motions steady and purposeful. There was no chill in her, no robotic detachment, only intention, focus. She didn't look at Caleb again, but he knew her mind was working, gears turning behind those watchful eyes. He'd seen that look once in Mosul, right before a medic named KJ broke protocol and sprinted through gunfire to drag a bleeding sergeant from the battlefield. The same resolve. Back then it had been behind a blood-smeared visor. Men, Travis muttered louder now, reaching for control. They'll let anyone wear a uniform, huh? Even kitchen burns come with medals these days. Miguel tensed behind the counter. A regular named Dory, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, paused mid-chew and slowly lowered her fork. Her gaze landed on Travis like a blade. Raina didn't respond. She finished the table, gave a nod to the family with kids, then turned toward the kitchen. As she passed Caleb, her hand brushed the edge of the counter. It wasn't an accident. Out back. 10 minutes. She kept walking. Caleb stood, grabbed his duffel, and left some bills on the table. Out back, the alley was narrow and worn, wedged between weathered brick walls near a rusted dumpster. A soft wind slipped between buildings, brushing against silence. Caleb leaned against the wall, arms crossed. A minute later, Raina emerged, apron untied, sleeves pushed high. Sunlight struck the scars on her arms and the ink just beneath them. You still remember the unit code? He asked. She glanced at him. Muscle memory, it's still there. Part of you. All of me, she said quietly, just buried. They stood for a beat, saying nothing. I thought you were dead. I was supposed to be. Caleb nodded slowly. I never forgot you. After Fallujah, word was you didn't make it out. No trace, no contact. That was intentional, she said, eyes distant. I didn't want to be found. Why? My ID burned up in the explosion. No voice for weeks, third-degree burns, memory gaps. They gave me a new name in the field hospital, Jane Doe, until the VA got around to entering me in the system months later. She looked down, and by then I was just another faceless vet in a rehab ward. No discharge, no rank, no records. Just gone. Caleb clenched his jaw. You could have reached out. To who? Think anyone would have believed me? She tapped her faded tattoo. This is all I had, and even that doesn't scan anymore. Caleb stepped forward. Sure. Below is the rewritten version of your excerpt in American English, expanded and crafted with the tone and depth of a professional storyteller. It stays faithful to every detail, emotion, and intention in the original, without adding or inventing new content. You ran straight into a hot zone to pull out 6 men. 3 survived. You were a hero long before the scars, And you're still one now. Heroes don't pour coffee for men who mock them. Maybe not, Raina replied, her voice low, steady. But soldiers? Soldiers know the war doesn't always end overseas. She gave a slow, thoughtful nod. So why are you really here, Caleb? I came in for coffee, he said, lips twitching into a faint smile. But I stayed because of you, and because those assholes in there have no idea who they're dealing with. She studied him carefully, eyes narrowing slightly. You still serving? Retired 2 years ago, Caleb said. Did some contract work for a bit. These days, I run veteran support programs for people the system tosses aside, like you. I'm not tossed aside, Raina said softly. Just filed in the wrong drawer. Same damn drawer either way, he said. Raina let out a tired sigh. You think any of this is winnable? You've been at this for 6 months, Caleb said, voice lowering. Gathering intel, recording them, taking notes. Her brows lifted. How did you... I've been watching you, he said. You look at those guys the same way we used to study terrain maps. I recognize recon eyes when I see them. A dry, rare chuckle escaped Raina. Langdon and Crane Consulting. Every Tuesday, same booth. They talk like nobody's listening, like I'm too broken or too dumb to understand what they're saying. But I've got every word saved. And now, you've got a witness, Caleb said. 2, he added, voice firm. I'm with you. She tilted her head, skeptical. Why? Because when I thought you were gone, Caleb said, emotion thickening in his throat, I thought the world had lost one of the bravest people I had ever met. But you're still here, still fighting. Then you know this isn't a battlefield, Raina warned. It's an ambush. If I move wrong, if I push too soon, I'm just the angry black woman who can't take a joke. They win. Then we don't give them the chance to twist it, he said. We document. We expose. Raina's eyes sharpened. You said you run support programs. How many contacts do you have in veteran advocacy? Civil rights lawyers? The press? Enough, Caleb replied. And I've got a journalist who owes me one. Raina folded her arms. Good, because I don't want a spark when this hits. I want a detonation. Then let's load the warhead. Inside the diner, the atmosphere had shifted, but Travis didn't notice. He was too busy bragging to Elliot, his voice obnoxiously loud as he leaned back in the booth. Stevens called this morning, Travis said, all puffed up pride. Biggest client we've got. Gave us the green light for phase 2, payroll restructuring. You know what that means? Elliot grinned knowingly. More creative firings. Exactly, Travis said with a smirk, and fewer lawsuits this time around. I learned my lesson with the Jenkins mess. Don't say race, say cultural mismatch, poor synergy, productivity gaps. 2 tables over, Raina stood scribbling a fake order on her notepad. Her phone, tucked discreetly in her apron pocket, was already recording. Caleb sat at the counter, quietly observing, giving the faintest nod to himself. As Raina passed him, their eyes met. A subtle nod exchanged between them, an unspoken signal. Later that night, after the diner had closed and the lights dimmed, Raina uploaded every recording to a secure drive, voice files, snippets of video, transcript drafts, all neatly cataloged and labeled. Retaliation, harassment, discriminatory intent, unlawful termination, client names, racial slurs. Caleb helped her compile the executive summary. Together, they built a timeline, traced connections, mapped out every detail. Then, with a steady breath, Raina hit send. 5 emails to 5 different recipients. A civil rights attorney, a contact at the Veterans Union, an anonymous whistleblower portal, a journalist, and a nonprofit watchdog organization. When the screen faded to black, she turned toward Caleb. Now we wait. He smiled. Probably not for long. She raised an eyebrow. That journalist you mentioned? She's on her way. Tuesday dawned clean and quiet, all golden sunlight and deceptive stillness. Raina Jefferson was up early. She always was on Tuesdays now, but not out of fear, out of discipline, preparation. War, she knew, wasn't about fury, it was about timing. She tied on her apron with the precision of someone strapping into body armor, reviewed her mental checklist like a medic prepping for surgery. She checked the recorder in her pocket, twice. The files had been backed up to the cloud, onto external drives, and verified by Caleb. He'd sent the full story packet to the journalist that morning. Her name was Lena Marquez, independent, relentless, unflinching. She didn't chase clicks. She chased the truth. Caleb had once saved her during a joint op in Syria. She hadn't forgotten. And today, she was walking into Ray's diner, not with cameras, but with purpose. Raina stepped inside just like she did every week, calm, composed, with a controlled fire simmering beneath the surface. Langdon and Crane's team was already there. Travis was in full swing. There she is, the Tuesday monster, he crowed. Elliot snorted with laughter. One of the junior execs started to raise a hand for a high five, but quickly thought better of it. Raina didn't flinch. She got to work. Coffee, water, taking orders. Her routine was clockwork. The diner was busier than usual. Regulars had brought friends. Something in the air had shifted. Miguel, the manager, raised an eyebrow from across the counter. Raina gave a small, deliberate nod. Caleb sat in his usual booth. At exactly 9:18 a.m., Lena Marquez walked through the door. No fanfare, no camera crew, just a notebook, a phone in her hand, and a quiet determination in her eyes. She looked like any other traveler until she looked at you. And then you realized she missed nothing. She slid into a booth near the front, ordered a black coffee, and cracked open her notebook. Raina poured the cup. Their eyes met. No need for words, just that slight nod, warriors who knew exactly what hour it was. Travis was halfway through some grandstanding monologue about workplace loyalty when Raina approached his table to refill the coffee. You know, he said loudly, some people just aren't company material. You can smell it on them. Like the coffee, she asked, pouring his cup with an easy hand. Exactly, he said, smirking. Burnt and bitter. Raina smiled faintly. Tell me more about your company. Sounds fascinating. Elliot perked up. You'd love it, Rainey. We streamline things, help companies cut the dead weight, get rid of legacy problems. Raina wiped the edge of the table. Define legacy. You know, people who don't fit, who slow things down, the ones who are always playing victim. Travis chuckled. I mean, look around. Would you hire someone like that for a front-facing role? Someone like, well, you know. Unfortunately, Raina replied, her voice like still water. I do. Across the room, Lena tapped her phone. The time read 10:03 a.m. Then Travis's phone rang. Mitchell, sir, he said, rising. Excuse me, boys. Big client. He stepped outside. Raina casually moved to the counter. Caleb joined her. He's about to feel the first tremor, he said. Journalist or lawyer, she asked. Journalist, Caleb replied. She published an open letter. Went live 3 minutes ago. Embedded videos, audio files, transcripts. Full names. Their own company policy documents. Headline reads, Veteran Waitress Records, Discriminatory Practices at Langdon and Crane, 6 months of evidence. Outside, Raina allowed herself the faintest ghost of a smile. Travis's voice could be heard rising through the glass. What do you mean we're under review, Darren? We've been your consultant for 2 years. Pause. What Instagram post? Pause. That's fake. And inside the warhead had detonated. Here is the rewritten version in fluent, natural American English, carefully expanded while staying true to every original detail, emotion, and character intention. All names and plot points are preserved. No additional elements were introduced. That's edited, just a prank, someone scoffed. A brief pause, then louder. She's just a waitress. Inside the diner, phones started buzzing. One of the younger executives glanced down at his screen, the color draining from his face. Guys, we're tagged in something. Elliot Crane grabbed his phone. As he scrolled, his expression slackened, disbelief flickering in his eyes. She posted it, all of it. She exposed everything. Not just us, someone whispered, voice tight with panic. All the client names, contracts, quotes. Raina returned to the table with steady steps, calm composure masking the storm underneath. Gentlemen, she said smoothly, her voice unwavering, can I get you anything else? Maybe a side of humility? Not a soul laughed. Miguel appeared quietly at her side, presence calm but alert. You need backup? He asked low. They're already surrounded, she replied quietly. Miguel glanced around. All around the room, phones were raised. Diners had stopped eating. Whispers swirled like wind across dry leaves. Even the kitchen staff stood frozen, peering through the order window with questioning, intent eyes. The door slammed open. Travis Langdon stormed back in, face red with rage. You think this is funny? He bellowed. You want to ruin people's lives? Raina turned to face him, unshaken. No, Mr. Langdon, I want to stop people from ruining others. You're just some bitter, burnt-out vet, he spat. Before she could reply, Caleb stood abruptly from a nearby booth, his voice sharp and cutting. She's a decorated combat medic. 3 tours, a Bronze Star, and more moral courage than you'll ever be able to comprehend. You're all insane, Travis hissed. This is slander. Lie, came a new voice. Lena stood up from a corner booth, her tone clear and resolute. Mr. Langdon, what you're looking at is evidence. My name is Lena Marquez. You might want to call a lawyer. The blood drained from Travis's face. We'll sue, he growled. We'll bury you. Raina tilted her head, voice like steel wrapped in velvet. You'll try, but unlike your business model, the truth scales a lot faster. Caleb took a step forward. And now the Department of Labor has it too. The diner didn't erupt in noise. It tightened into silence. A different kind of tension filled the space, watchful, alert. All eyes locked on Travis. Phones pointed at him like a wall of blinking red lights. Surveillance by the people. He turned and fled. Raina let out a quiet breath. The pressure didn't release. It just shifted. The war's not over, Caleb said beside her. No, she agreed softly, but we just won the first battle. Lena approached and extended her hand. Sergeant Jefferson, she said with quiet respect, thank you for your service and for your silence. It just became the loudest sound online. Raina shook her hand firm and clean. No applause broke out. No cheers. Just an unspoken reverence that settled over the room like gravity. Outside, Travis's phone rang and rang. But something had shifted. The world had learned Raina Jefferson's name. And for the first time in years, she stopped counting her breaths. She didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. The viral post, thousands of shares, millions of views, was still just a moment. Change, real change, wasn't a single clip. It was slow, grueling, and more dangerous than anything she'd faced in uniform. Caleb knew it too. That's why he didn't leave. He stayed close, watching the door, watching the windows, watching every nervous twitch and forced smile from Langdon and Crane's remaining crew. They sat like students punished in public. But shame had short legs. Pride lasted longer. And predators? Raina understood them best when they were injured. That was when they struck. Tuesday afternoon passed quietly. Travis was gone. Vanished, for now. But Elliot lingered, pretending to sip cold coffee, his fingers twitching on the table, eyes scanning every corner of the diner. They always leave someone behind, Raina murmured to Caleb as she wiped down a counter. Scouting damage, he replied with a knowing glance. From the kitchen pass, Miguel leaned in. Police came by. Someone filed a report. Said there was a violent altercation here. Anonymous? Caleb asked. Sounded like it, Miguel confirmed. Langdon's move, Caleb muttered. You think he'll push harder? Raina didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her eyes answered. Yes. At 4:15 p.m., a black SUV rolled to a smooth stop in front of Ray's diner. 2 men in gray suits stepped out, poised and polished, carrying the kind of calm that came with courtroom experience and unspoken threats. They entered without hesitation. One showed a badge from the State Department of Labor. The other kept quiet. Raina Jefferson? The agent asked. She stepped forward without pause. Yes. We're conducting a preliminary inquiry into your reports, he said. Come in. May we speak with you privately? Miguel nodded toward the small office. In there. They walked in. Caleb followed. I'm her legal witness, he stated bluntly. The agents didn't argue. Inside, Raina placed folders on the table, documents carefully compiled, time-stamped, verified, and archived. The senior agent read in silence, brows rising occasionally as the weight of the truth sank in. You understand, he said eventually, this is enough to initiate a federal investigation. That's the goal, Raina replied, steady as ever. There will be backlash. Retaliation is common. It's already started, she said flatly. If necessary, we'll assign protection. It will be, Caleb interjected grimly. The agent looked at him. You support her strategy? Caleb shook his head slightly. She doesn't have a strategy. Langdon does. We're just staying ahead of it. That night, Raina's story aired on 3 major news outlets. Lena's footage spread like wildfire. A 5-minute clip played on loop, replaying the moment she stood up to Travis, the confrontation, the calm resistance, Caleb's voice echoing through living rooms across the country. She's a decorated combat medic. The hashtags exploded. Hashtag veteran waitress, hashtag justice served, hashtag courage. In uniform messages flooded in. By midnight, Raina had over 200 new emails. Most were kind, a few were not. One stood out, a picture of her face crudely photoshopped inside a Target. She didn't flinch. She forwarded it to the agent. Looks like we'll take that protection detail after all, Caleb said, jaw tight. By Wednesday morning, Ray's diner was full, not with regular customers, but with veterans. Dozens of them. Some came alone. Others arrived in wheelchairs or leaned heavily on prosthetic limbs. They wore jackets faded with time, patches that whispered of battles fought long ago. None of them raised their voices. None waved signs. They just sat, ordered coffee, watched Raina. When she poured a refill for one of them, the man looked up at her, eyes glistening. You carried us out, he said softly. I never forgot. She blinked fast, her throat tightening. Glad you made it home, she whispered. He tapped his cane twice on the floor, a silent salute. By noon, a reporter from a national morning show arrived. She spoke with customers waiting in line. One woman held up a handmade sign that read, Scars are stories too. Raina and Caleb stayed out of the frame, letting others speak. Let the truth echo from voices that weren't theirs. Langdon's collapse wasn't quiet either. That afternoon, his name trended again. This time, it wasn't Raina's doing. A former intern had come forward, leaking emails that exposed Langdon's order to streamline urban representation. A thinly veiled euphemism for racially targeted layoffs. Sponsors pulled out. Clients canceled contracts. Langdon and Crane Consulting nosedived. The board issued a statement. We are initiating a full internal review. But it was too late. On Thursday, Caleb's phone buzzed with a new message. Incoming, he's back in town, not alone. He showed it to Raina. What's the play? He asked. She tightened the knot on her apron. Same as always, she said. We don't blink. That evening, Travis Langdon returned to Ray's diner. Not with a lawyer, this time with a camera crew. He swung the door open like a man who still believed he could command a room with just his presence. I'm here to clear my name, he declared, voice pitched for the microphone. Fake news has gone too far. Raina stood behind the counter. Caleb stepped forward into Travis's path. You're not welcome here. Here is a faithful, expanded rewrite of the provided excerpt in natural American English. It preserves every emotional nuance and plot point while enhancing atmosphere, depth, and flow. No details were added beyond the original. This is private property, someone muttered. But Travis Langdon, defiant and smug, turned squarely to the cameras. You see this? Silencing a citizen. Cancel culture, running wild. His voice rose, hungry for drama. She lied. Faked the whole thing. Those burn scars, just for sympathy. A cold, uneasy silence spread through the diner like frost creeping over glass. Then quietly, one of the veterans pushed back their chair and stood. Calm and steady, their voice cut through the quiet. I watched her pull a soldier out of a burning Humvee. Her arm caught fire. She didn't stop. Travis turned, caught off guard. Another veteran stood, then another, and another still. One by one they rose, not with anger but with solemn resolve, each offering a memory, a name, a battlefield, each speaking of what Raina had done, who she was. By the time the 12th veteran stood, the room felt like a courtroom, and the truth was unanimous. Langdon's smirk contorted into something twisted, sour, but the cameras kept rolling. At last, Raina stepped forward. Her voice was quiet, but it carried more weight than any shout. I didn't burn myself for sympathy, she said. Every scar I have, I earned, saving men who thought they were about to die. She turned, locking eyes with Langdon. You built an empire on fear, on discrimination, and now you're afraid of a waitress? She faced the cameras. That's the real story. Langdon turned and fled. This time, nobody followed him. Inside the hush that remained, Raina Jefferson walked to the back room of Ray's diner, untied her apron, and slipped it off. The fabric fell into her hands, soft and damp with sweat. She let herself breathe. For the first time that day, maybe the first time all week, her hands trembled, not from fear, but from release. That kind of tremor only came when you'd been holding the line too long. Out front, Caleb Hartman was drawing down the blinds, gently guiding the remaining veterans toward the side exit. They'd lingered after closing, helping with whatever they could, stacking dishes, clearing tables, fixing the drip under the sink. One had even brought a box of nails and quietly reinforced the front door's frame. They understood. A storm doesn't end just because the thunder quiets. Miguel walked in holding 2 mugs of coffee. He handed one to Raina without saying a word. You holding up? Caleb asked as he joined them. Raina took a sip. The bitter heat grounded her. My feet are killing me. My ears are still ringing. I can't feel my left shoulder. She took another drink. But yeah, I'm good. Miguel pulled out a chair and sat. We had news crews camping out this morning. One tried to climb on the roof. I had to chase him down with a broom. Raina gave a small, tired smile. It's not about me anymore, she said. It's what I represent that has them scared. Good, Caleb muttered. Let it scare them. The bell above the door jingled again. Lena Marquez stepped in, still wearing the same immaculate blazer she'd worn earlier that day on national television. A tablet was tucked under her arm. Raina, she said simply, hope you weren't planning on sleeping tonight. Raina smirked. Haven't in weeks. Lena set the tablet on the table and tapped it to life. Charts, social media metrics, maps of viral spread, all lit up the screen in a pulsing collage. You're global, she said. 6 languages and counting. The clip of Langdon getting shouted down by 12 veterans, 8.2 million views and climbing. Caleb gave a low whistle. 90% of the comments are positive, Lena added. The other 10 are bots. Miguel gestured toward Raina. She won't say it, but she's running on fumes. She can rest later, Lena said briskly. Right now we've got a window. A window for what? Raina asked. To make this more than just a takedown, Lena said. To build something. I'm not a movement, Raina said, shaking her head. No, Lena agreed. You're the spark. The movement comes next. Raina leaned back, the tablet's glow reflecting in her tired eyes. The idea of becoming something more, doing something more. It pulled at the quiet, dormant corners of her, the parts of her spirit that hadn't died in Iraq, the parts that had been buried, not broken, after the explosion. What would that even look like? She asked softly. Veteran advocacy, Lena replied. Policy reform, workplace equity, holding corporations accountable. You can speak where others have been silenced, and people will listen. Raina looked to Caleb. You in? He didn't blink. Always. That weekend, Raina and Caleb met with a local nonprofit focused on helping veterans transition back into civilian life. They gave testimony, told their stories. A boardroom full of policymakers listened as the cameras rolled. But for once, Raina didn't feel like a spectacle. She felt heard. One woman wiped away tears openly. Another slipped her a handwritten note that read, My brother didn't make it home, but if he had, I'd have wanted him to meet you. The following Tuesday, Travis Langdon didn't show his face at Ray's diner. His lawyer did. She arrived alone, dressed to the letter of formality, and carried a manila envelope. Cease and desist, she said crisply, sliding it onto the counter, for defamation. Miguel accepted the envelope without a word. You'll need to serve that properly, Caleb said from his booth, not even looking up from his coffee. And it won't stick. Truth is the best defense. My client wishes to settle this quietly. Raina emerged from the back, her voice even. Your client tried to destroy people's lives, publicly. And now he wants silence in return. The lawyer's eyes flicked toward the corner, and only then did she spot the small red light of the cameras, rolling again. You're being recorded, Caleb said evenly, for everyone's protection. The lawyer turned and left without another word. Later that night, someone new came in. Not a reporter, not an attorney, just a man in his 50s, with a close-cropped military haircut and a folded uniform coat under one arm. He waited patiently until the dinner crowd thinned out. Then Raina approached him. "Sergeant Jefferson?" he asked. She looked up. He extended a hand. "Colonel Avery Mason, retired. You treated me in Ramadi. I was unconscious. Never got to thank you." She took his hand slowly. "You're welcome." He stepped back and gave her a crisp salute. "The Pentagon's watching. So is the Department of Veterans Affairs. If you ever want to speak to them, just say the word." Raina hesitated, the moment heavy with possibility. Then she said the only thing that felt true. "I will, when I'm ready." Outside, the night air was cool and still. Raina and Caleb sat on the back steps of the diner, the street lit by the quiet glow of distant windows. "You did it," Caleb said. "Not yet." "Then what's this?" Raina looked out at the city, at the aftershocks of everything they'd stirred up, and the quiet strength of those who had stood beside her. "This," she said, "is just the beginning." By Tuesday morning, Ray's Diner wasn't just a diner anymore. The hand-painted sign still swung gently above the door, unchanged, but everything beneath it had shifted. People came not just for eggs and coffee, but to leave letters, to say thank you, and sometimes to confess. One man in a gray suit stepped up to the counter, his eyes lowered in shame. Months ago, he'd heckled Raina, spat a cruel name he regretted the second it left his lips. That day, she had served him coffee. Today, she did the same. No grudge, no smile. Just grace. He left a $50 bill on the counter and walked out without a word. Back in the kitchen, Miguel flipped pancakes on the gridiron as Caleb came in holding a thick stack of printed emails. 4 more testimonies overnight, Caleb said. All former employees of Langdon and Crane. Same stories. Profiling, coded language, forced resignations. Miguel didn't look up. "Send them to Lena?" "Already did. She's building a full case. Everything's documented, cross-referenced." Miguel checked the clock. "And what time does our villain usually crawl out of his crypt?" "Langdon?" Caleb said dryly. "If karma hasn't come for him yet, probably around noon." At 11:37 a.m., a white envelope slid under the diner's front door. Miguel bent and picked it up. Inside was a printed flyer, fake headlines screaming, "Veteran fraud caught in media hoax." Someone had doctored a photo, but the truth had already taken root, and it was growing. "Raina arrested? That's a lie," Caleb said flatly, tossing the headline aside. "Langdon's desperate," Miguel muttered from behind the counter, launching some sloppy smear campaign. Pathetic. Raina glanced over the printed nonsense once, then let it slip from her fingers into the trash. "That's the best he can do?" "He's grasping," Caleb replied, voice tight with caution. "But that's when people are the most dangerous, when they've got nothing left to lose." Later that afternoon, Raina and Caleb drove out to a nearby university. They'd been invited to speak with a student veterans group, young service members just beginning the slow, uncertain journey of reintegration. The room was packed, wall to wall. Young faces, many of them eager, others guarded, all of them shaped by the invisible weight of their pasts. Haunted eyes, hopeful questions. Raina spoke first. No dramatics, no stirring speech, just plain, unwavering truth. She told them what it felt like to go from a battlefield to a break room, from clutching bloodied lives in her hands to refilling coffee cups for people who never saw her. She told them how it felt to disappear in plain sight. Caleb added his story, one shaped by silence, a silence that had once protected him, then slowly swallowed him whole. He spoke of how stillness became survival, and how forgetting was easier than hoping. When they finished, the room held its breath. Then a young Marine in the back rose slowly to his feet. His voice cracked, but his question cut clean. "How did you not lose yourself when no one saw you anymore?" Raina didn't answer right away. Her gaze dropped for a moment, then lifted again, steady. "I did lose myself," she said softly. "For a while, but someone saw me again. And when they did, I remembered who I was." That night, the television segment aired. From battlefield to break room, the hidden war of veterans in civilian life. Footage showed Raina behind the diner counter, calmly enduring the venom of cruel men. Then clips of her speaking at the university, answering questions with grace. Voiceovers followed. Veterans from across the country praising her courage, calling her by name. Langdon scrambled to respond. He released a press statement framing the situation as a regrettable misunderstanding blown out of proportion. But the internet had no patience for damage control. It devoured his words and spat them back in pieces. Raina didn't answer publicly. She didn't need to. But the threats kept coming. Just before closing that night, a rock smashed through one of Ray's diner's front windows. Shards of glass had exploded inward. Thankfully, no one was hurt. Tied to the rock was a note scribbled on torn paper. "Scars don't make you a hero." Miguel boarded up the broken window with a sheet of plywood before sunrise. Caleb installed 2 security cameras. Raina swept up the broken glass without saying a word. The next morning, a young woman walked in with her toddler. She approached the counter shyly and handed Raina a card made from folded construction paper. Crayon colors spilled across it. "You are strong like Wonder Woman." Raina knelt beside the child, accepted the card with both hands, and said quietly, "Thank you. That means more than you know." Later that afternoon, headlines broke again. Langdon and Crane had lost another major contract. A prominent tech corporation had pulled out of a multi-million-dollar partnership. The company's board released a second statement, this time noticeably humbler. An internal investigation had officially begun. Langdon's social media accounts vanished overnight. Elliot Crane, his longtime associate, submitted his resignation. Raina heard the news while wiping down tables. She didn't cheer. She didn't even smile. "It's not about watching them fall," she told Caleb quietly. "It's about making sure no one else has to go through what we did." Caleb nodded. Justice isn't vengeance, it's prevention. By Friday, the diner had a new addition. Miguel built it himself, a warm cedar-paneled wall along the far end of the dining room. He polished it until it gleamed, then mounted a plaque above it, the honor wall. Veterans began arriving with old photos. Some were snapshots of themselves. Others were friends they'd lost, faces frozen in memory, uniforms still crisp. "Some of my friends didn't make it home," one man whispered. Raina brought a photo too, an old snapshot of her unit, taken before the fire, before the shrapnel, before the silence. She pinned it to the wall with steady hands. Beneath it, she placed a caption, "Not gone, not forgotten, just waiting to be seen again." People started coming just to see the wall, and when they left, something about them had changed. By Monday morning, hammers echoed down Main Street. The diner's shattered front window was replaced, not just with glass, but with reinforced polycarbonate, the kind that doesn't break easily. A local contractor had donated it after watching Raina's story on the news. He brought his teenage daughter along to help. "She needs to see people like you," he said. Raina thanked him quietly. She was learning to accept gratitude without bracing for insult. The week ahead felt different. Not easier, not gentler, but aligned, purposeful, solid beneath her feet. The backlash hadn't disappeared. If anything, the threats had gotten more creative. Fake Yelp reviews, anonymous hate mail. One letter had been scrawled in marker across a jagged scrap of cardboard. "Heroes don't cry behind counters." Raina didn't cry. She read it once, then passed it to Caleb. "Add it to the folder." He did. By midday, Lena Marquez returned, this time with a full film crew. "Docu-series," she said as she unpacked her gear. 3 parts: your story, the system, and what comes next. Raina wasn't eager to be on camera again, but she trusted Lena. Lena asked the kind of questions most people didn't even know they should be asking. They began filming beside the honor wall. Miguel cleared out tables for the crew. The regulars stayed respectfully quiet. Even the fry cook stopped whistling. "What changed once your story went public?" Lena asked. Raina didn't speak right away. Her eyes moved slowly across the wall, faces she loved, eyes she'd never forget, laughter now just a memory. "Everything," she said finally, "and nothing. People looked at me differently, but I didn't change. I was just revealed." Revealed as what? As someone worth listening to. Outside, a gray sedan slowed in front of the diner. A man inside snapped a photo, then drove past again. Caleb discreetly took a picture of the license plate. You think that's Langdon's people? Miguel asked. Wouldn't put it past him. Let him come back, Raina said. Her voice was calm but unwavering. Let him walk through that door again. She paused. But this time, he better bring the truth. Tuesday dawned with heavy storm clouds rolling across the sky. The rain pounded the diner's windows, but inside, the booths were full. A group of retired nurses took over the back corner. They brought flowers. Left notes that read, "We see you. Thank you for holding the line." At exactly 10:32 a.m., a courier arrived with a letter bearing the official seal of the Department of Veterans Affairs. Raina opened it at the counter as Caleb leaned over her shoulder. What's it say? They want me to testify, she said, eyes scanning the page. Where? Senate Subcommittee, Workplace Discrimination Against Veterans. Caleb smiled. That's your next battlefield. She folded the letter with care. Then we planned the mission. That night, a video appeared on social media, shaky lighting, a dim office, a man who looked nothing like the smug face Raina had once served coffee to. Travis Langdon looked worn down, hollow, unshaven. This is to set the record straight, he began, his voice cracked on the edges. I was wrong. I let a toxic culture grow under my watch. I hurt people. I mocked a woman who gave more to this country than I ever have or ever will. If I could take it back, I would. He swallowed hard. But since I can't, I'm stepping down from Langdon and Crane, effective immediately. And I'm donating my shares to a foundation supporting veteran reintegration. The video spread like wildfire. The reactions were split. Some called it redemption, others a calculated PR stunt. Raina didn't post a response, she didn't need to, but when she watched it, her expression softened, just slightly. That was real, Caleb said, watching her closely. Parts of it, she replied. Maybe that's enough. She looked out the diner window at the booth where Travis used to sit. It was empty now, but for the first time the air around it felt clean, unpoisoned. Then came Thursday, another surprise. A group of high school students entered the diner with handmade signs in bright colors. Thank you, Miss Raina. Your scars are beautiful. Real heroes serve on all fronts. One student stepped forward and handed her a folder, an assignment the entire class had completed. The same two men would come in, laughing, taunting, calling me war doll, Scarface, medic Barbie. They knew what I'd been through, and still they chose cruelty. But I stayed silent. I served their coffee. I cleared their plates. And every week, I went home with each insult, every recorded confession. Raina hadn't collected them out of spite or vengeance. She did it because she'd come to realize that her silence had never protected the vulnerable. It had only shielded the ones doing the harm. She opened the folder with quiet resolve and slid a transcript across the table. Her voice was steady, unwavering. This is a word-for-word record. Senior executives detailing how to terminate veterans and people of color without leaving a legal trail. Coded phrases, rigged performance metrics, cultural fit excuses, everything they use to make discrimination look like policy. One senator, a dignified older woman with sharp glasses and neatly pulled back silver hair, leaned in, her tone laced with both curiosity and concern. And how did they respond once you brought this to light? Raina didn't hesitate. They tried to crush me. I was targeted online. They launched smear campaigns, sent cease and desist letters, had people follow me. There were moments I feared for my safety. And how did you respond? I kept showing up. I kept documenting. Caleb, seated silently just one row behind her, remained still, his eyes locked on her. Lena sat a little further away, pen flying across the pages of her notebook, capturing every word. Another senator, more skeptical, tapped the end of his pen against the desk. Do you believe what happened to you reflects a systemic problem? Or was it just your individual case? Raina didn't blink. If this were only about me, you wouldn't be holding this hearing right now. That answer sent a low hum through the chamber. The committee chair gave a thoughtful nod. Raina continued, voice rising with quiet strength. I'm not the story here. I'm just one symptom of something bigger. If you truly want to fix the system, start by believing us. Start by seeing us, not only when we're wearing the uniform, but especially when we're not. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with the weight of her words. Then came the next question, from another member of the committee. Do you believe corporate reform is enough? Only if it has teeth, she replied. Only if you give people like me something more than applause. Give us the legal right to stand up and speak without being punished for it. The chair leaned back slowly in his seat, then nodded once more. Thank you, Sergeant Jefferson. Your documents will be entered into the record. Raina stood. So did Caleb. As she stepped out of the hearing room, a staffer approached and quietly handed her a small pin, the Senate Veteran Advocate Medal. It wasn't an official award, just symbolic, informal, but it meant something. She held it in her palm for a long, silent moment, then slipped it into her pocket. Outside the building, a crowd had gathered. Reporters, activists, curious strangers. Some clapped, some saluted. Raina didn't wave, but she nodded, once, firmly. Lena was waiting on the steps. You just made history, she said. Raina shrugged. I told the truth. Same thing. They began walking slowly down the stone steps. Caleb's phone buzzed. He checked the screen. Langdon's posted again. Raina didn't pause. Let him. I've said all I needed to. He's not addressing you this time, Caleb replied, catching up. He's warning the other execs, telling them what happened to him could happen to them. That made Raina stop, just briefly. She looked at Caleb. Fear can be useful. He nodded, especially if it keeps them from doing it again. When they reached the car, she turned back once. Her eyes landed on the Capitol. Not with awe, but as if measuring the ground she had just covered. Later that day, Raina returned to Ray's diner, not as a waitress this time, but as someone who had just stood before the United States Senate and spoken her truth. The bell above the door still jingled the same way. The familiar smell of fresh coffee floated through the air. Miguel glanced up from the register and gave her a nod. Quiet, sincere. No speeches, no spotlight. Just acknowledgement. And that was enough. The regulars stood and applauded, not out of formality or obligation, but out of respect. For her. Raina gave a modest wave and moved behind the counter with practiced ease. She wasn't in uniform today. Just simple slacks and a button-down. Her sleeves were rolled up, her scars exposed. No one looked away. Caleb walked in a few minutes later, loosening his tie and setting his briefcase down. He slid onto his usual bar stool. You know you trended higher than the State of the Union last night, he said casually. Raina smirked. Don't tempt me with power. Too late. Across the nation, her testimony was everywhere. News anchors dissected every line. Social media flooded with quotes from the hearing. One in particular had gone viral. Start by believing us, especially when we're not in uniform. It became more than a phrase. It became a rallying cry. Veterans began sharing their stories using that quote as a hashtag. Some of the posts were heartbreaking. Others were fierce. Most had never been heard until now. That evening, Raina's phone rang. The caller ID read, "Private number," she answered. Miss Jefferson, this is Brigadier General Louise Merrick. I've been authorized to formally invite you to join a national task force on veteran reintegration and workplace equity. You'll be compensated, but more importantly, you'll be heard. We want your voice at the table. Raina hesitated. Why me, May? Because many of us have been talking about this issue for years. But you showed us what it looks like when it's ignored, and what it could become when finally Tully listens. But Raina didn't respond right away, but then, I accept. That night, Miguel hosted a quiet dinner at the diner. No press, no cameras, just the regular staff, a few veterans, Lena, Caleb, and Raina. The honor wall glowed softly beneath a string of warm lights. Someone brought a guitar. Old road songs filled the room. Caleb told a story so ridiculous, everyone ended up crying from laughter. Raina stood with a glass of lemonade in hand. I never set out to be anyone's example, she said. I just didn't want to disappear. And you made it possible for me to stay visible. Maybe now we can help the next person stay seen too. She raised her glass. To staying seen. Everyone joined her. 3 days later, Langdon and Crane Consulting dissolved. Officially. Their final press release acknowledged wrongdoing, accepted full responsibility, and pledged support for the new veteran initiative that Raina would help lead. Some called it PR damage control. Others said it was poetic justice. Raina just called it overdue. A week later, she flew to Chicago for a round of strategy meetings with nonprofit leaders and federal coordinators. The agenda was packed: legislation drafts, policy proposals, outreach frameworks. But when Raina spoke, the room listened. Because she didn't sound like a politician. She sounded like someone who had bled through silence. After one session, a young congressional aide approached her. "I've worked on veteran bills for 2 years," she said, "but today you made me actually see them." Raina nodded. "Then fight harder." Back at the diner, Miguel and Caleb kept the place running. One afternoon, a man came in and asked about Raina. "She's out doing advocacy work," Miguel told Ian. The man nodded. "Good. She's needed." He left behind an envelope. Inside was a check. No name, just a note, for the one she's still carrying. When Raina returned, a quiet change had appeared. A banner now hung gently above the honor wall. It read, "Legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's what you make visible." Raina stood in front of it for a long while. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. She knew now her worth would never again be measured by her silence. Fall settled gently over the city, painting the streets with soft gold and rust-red leaves. At Ray's Diner, the season brought warmer pies, stronger coffee, and the quiet, dependable rhythm of healing. One morning, Raina stood outside in the crisp air, watching leaves dance in the breeze. She wore her old field jacket, not to hide her scars, but because the wind reminded her of dawn patrols in Iraq. A different battlefield, but the same sharp vigilance. Inside the diner, Caleb Hartman sat at the counter, eyes skimming over a new issue of The Atlantic. A bold feature article spread across the top half of the page, "The Veteran Who Changed the Conversation." And there she was, Raina Jefferson, her photo stark and commanding. Her scars were plainly visible, but it was the steadiness in her gaze that caught you, held you. She looked unflinching, not hardened, but clear. In the kitchen, Miguel slid a fresh tray of cornbread into the oven. Business was booming more than ever, yet he flatly refused to raise prices. "Some people need to afford dignity," he liked to say, and he meant it. That same morning, a young man limped in through the front door. His gait was stiff, his camo jacket weathered and frayed at the cuffs. He paused in the entryway, uncertain, scanning the room, until he caught sight of the wall lined with framed photographs and brass plates. The honor wall. Raina met him halfway before he could say anything. "First time here," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. "I heard this was the place, the one that listens." Raina gave a small nod and gestured toward the counter. "Sit down. We've got coffee and quiet, both stronger than you'd expect." By mid-afternoon, a yellow school bus pulled up outside. A teacher led 10 students inside. They were working together on a group paper about modern-day heroism. The kids took turns asking questions, and Raina answered each one with warmth, but gently turned the spotlight away from herself, directing their attention to the faces on the wall behind her. "I'm not the whole story," she told them, "just a chapter in it." One girl raised her hand, curious. "Do you ever wish you'd stayed invisible?" Raina paused, the question hanging in the air like dust in sunlight. "Sometimes," she admitted, "it was safer that way, but it was lonelier too." That evening, out behind the diner where the loading crates and garden pots made a kind of haphazard patio, Caleb met her in the quiet. "You got the message?" he asked. She nodded. "Yeah, he's coming alone. I told him it was the only way." At precisely 7:14 p.m., the door creaked open, and Travis Langdon walked in. No suit, no entourage. Just an old blazer, scuffed at the elbows, and a face worn thin by sleepless nights. Raina didn't leave her post behind the counter. He made his way to her slowly, as though each step cost him something. "I'm not here to redeem myself," he said, his voice brittle. "And I'm not asking for forgiveness. I came because there are things I need to say, out loud." Raina didn't flinch. "Then say them." He glanced around the diner. Families sat huddled in booths, veterans swapping stories over steaming plates, strangers turned regulars chatting like old friends. His eyes landed on the honor wall, and something in him faltered. "For most of my life, I thought power was something you owned, something you could control, distribute. wield like a sword. His voice cracked. And I did. I used it like a weapon. I carved it into your arms, into others. His gaze dropped to the floor. But when I lost that power, I finally understood. I never really had any. Not the kind that matters. A silence thickened around them. Then, from the inside a pocket of his jacket, Travis pulled a folded document and placed it gently on the counter between them. This is my full statement, he said. I've signed over half my estate, personal funds, to veteran mental health programs. No press release, no PR spin, just because I finally understand the price of the silence I kept. Raina stared down at the paper but didn't reach for it. And what do you want from me? He asked. Lush? Tomorrow, Dieson. He shook his head. I just didn't want the last word between us to be yours alone. She looked him straight in the eye. It still is. He nodded just once, then turned and walked out. No camera crew followed him, just the weight of all he'd left unsaid, finally spoken. Later that night, Raina sat outside beneath the stars, the hum of traffic softened by the quiet of the hour. Lena Marquez joined her, pulling her coat tighter against the chill. Final episode goes live tomorrow, Lena said. You ready for 1 million people to hear the whole arc? Raina gave a faint smile. They've already heard the storm, she replied. Let them hear the silence too. Lena cocked an eyebrow. Ever think about writing a book? About what? About what happens when the war doesn't end. It just changes shape. Raina sat with that thought for a while. Maybe, she said slowly, but first I want to keep showing up. That's the real ending. Not applause, just presence. This next morning, when Miguel flipped the diner sign to open, a small crowd had already gathered outside. No reporters, no microphones, just people. Some brought folded notes. Others had cups of coffee for the crew. A few held carefully folded flags in their arms. Inside, the honor wall had run out of space. So Miguel cleared another section and began building a second one. The legacy continued. Raina stepped behind the counter, hands steady, and poured the first cup of coffee for the day. Another chapter began. By early winter, a light dusting of snow flirted with the edges of the city. Sidewalks were powdered with memory, the kind that clings like breath on glass. The wind tapped at the windows of Ray's diner, but inside warmth lingered, not from a fireplace, but from the steady presence of people. In the back kitchen, Raina stood holding a small, worn photograph. It had arrived in a plain envelope with no return address. In the picture, a much younger Raina knelt beside a wounded soldier in the desert. The name scrawled on the back in faded ink, J. Wright. She held the photo in silence for a long time before framing it with care and walking it out to the honor wall. She pinned it beneath a small brass plate that read, Fallen but Found. That day, the diner held a quiet gathering, not for the public, not for the press, but for veterans returning from recent deployments. Lena filmed fragments for her documentary, but stayed in the background, never intruding. It had been Raina's idea to give each veteran a seat at the table. No speeches, no introductions, just a place to sit, to be. Sometimes, she had said, coming home just means having a place where you don't have to explain who you are. James Wright arrived late, not out of disrespect, but because he'd taken the long route from the train station. When he stepped inside and saw Raina, she looked up and froze. He wasn't a ghost, but he wasn't untouched by time either. His frame was still military, but his eyes, those had traveled far. He approached her without a word and held out a patch, the big red one. Her breath caught in her chest. You kept it, she whispered. He nodded. You saved me. I spent 10 years thinking you didn't make it. Then one day I walk into this diner and there you are, and I couldn't breathe. Why didn't you say anything? Because I wasn't ready, and because I wanted to see what you'd built. I didn't want to remember you only for what we lost. They sat quietly, no need to fill the silence with explanations. The past didn't demand words, only recognition. Then Raina smiled faintly. We never did finish that chess game in Ballard. You were losing, James said. You wish. They laughed. That night, the final episode of the documentary aired. It was titled The Weight We Carry. It didn't open with images of Raina's scars or a courtroom drama. It began with her pouring coffee, serving, listening, Only after that did it reveal who she truly was. The reaction was instant and overwhelming. Donations poured in for the veteran reintegration program. Schools requested her for speaking engagements. Employers asked for training, lawmakers reached out for meetings. But Raina stayed where she was, behind the counter, in the diner, where change felt real, tangible. One morning, a little girl entered, hand in hand with her mother. She pointed to the honor wall. "That lady looks like a superhero." Her mother knelt beside her. "She is," she said, "but not because of what she did in the war, because of what she did after." From behind the counter, Raina watched quietly. Her heart swelled, not with pride, but with peace. By week's end, the city council voted to rename the block where Ray's diner stood. The new sign read, "Mom, Veterans Row." A modest plaque was set into the sidewalk. Here, a woman turned silence into justice and made her scars a source of strength. Miguel wiped a tear when it was unveiled. Caleb nodded once, solemn and proud. And Raina, she knelt, brushed her fingertips across the plaque, and whispered, "It's not just me, it's all of us." Letters came more frequently now, some handwritten with trembling fingers, others typed in bold fonts from anonymous senders. They poured in from every corner of the country, children with wondering eyes, elderly veterans who had long buried their pain, strangers who never signed their names but left behind raw honesty. Every single letter was steeped in gratitude, reverence, and something deeper, recognition. One child wrote, "You reminded me that my story isn't over." Another said, "I showed my daughter your photo. That same day she stopped hiding the scars on her arms." One simply read, "Anino, thank you for standing still long enough for us to find you." Raina Jefferson stored them all in a simple box under the diner counter, carefully labeled in permanent marker. Proof, not trophies, not keepsakes. Proof that standing your ground, even in silence, could echo louder than any speech. As December crept in with the air growing crisp and streets glittering with string lights, Lena Marquez approached Raina with a new idea glowing in her eyes. "I want to turn the docu-series into a curriculum," she said. "Something real, something we can bring to schools, police departments, corporations. Teach empathy where it's needed most." Raina blinked, a little stunned. "You think they'll listen?" "They already do," Lena said with quiet certainty. "They listen to you, and that's all I need." Raina hesitated, then gave a slow, resolute nod. "Then let's do it." The following Monday, Caleb Hartman stood at the counter holding a sealed envelope with a very official return address. "It's from the White House," he said casually, though his eyes betrayed a glint of mischief. Raina arched an eyebrow. "Another medal?" "Worse," Caleb grinned. "A dinner invitation." She groaned, "Do I have to wear a dress?" "Only if you want to give them a heart attack," he teased. That evening, Raina stood in front of the full-length mirror in Lena's apartment, arms crossed, glaring at the reflection staring back. The dress was beautiful, navy blue, floor-length, elegant without being loud. But it wasn't her. It felt like a costume, a requirement. But the invitation had been explicit. Formal attire required. "You look like someone who should be on a postage stamp," Lena joked from the doorway, arms folded, grinning. Raina rolled her eyes. "You're lucky I didn't show up in boots. You'd have started a fashion revolution." Later that night, beneath the brilliant crystal chandeliers of the historic presidential ballroom, Raina moved cautiously through a space that glittered with gold trim and marble grandeur. Military leaders in full regalia, cabinet officials, and decorated veterans mingled with wine glasses in hand, speaking in polished tones and rehearsed confidence. But none of them carried the stillness she did. None had the eyes of someone who had spent years trying to disappear. They were all shine and ceremony. But Raina? Raina carried something far rarer, stillness with intent. A hush spread as the president approached the podium. His voice rang clear and measured. "Tonight, we honor not only those who served in uniform, but also those who continued to serve in silence." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Then, we recognize Sergeant Raina Jefferson, whose courage off the battlefield has become a catalyst for national change." The room erupted into applause. Raina stepped forward, her shoulders squared, spine straight. She did not bow her head, nor offer the kind of polite smile expected in such spaces. She accepted the recognition not as a reward, but as a symbol. And when the camera shutters clicked, in a frenzied staccato, she didn't flinch. Not this time. This time, she was in control of the story. Back home, the diner settled back into its old rhythm. Caleb placed the medal in the front window, not for show, but as a quiet reminder. That greatness doesn't always wear stars on its shoulders. Sometimes it wears aprons. Sometimes it pours coffee, wipes counters, listens more than it speaks. One afternoon, Raina found James Wright sitting at a table with a young man. James was helping him fill out a job application. "He just got out," James murmured. "Wants to work. Doesn't know how to say it without sounding broken." Raina smiled gently. "He's not broken," she said. "He just speaks a different kind of truth." The curriculum Lena had proposed began to take shape. They named it Scars and Stories. It wasn't abstract, it wasn't theory, it was real voices, real veterans. Lessons in empathy, in resilience, in how to see beyond surface judgments. During its pilot session at a local high school, a student hesitated before raising a hand. "Is it okay," they asked, "if I don't want to join the military, but still want to help people who did?" Raina's answer was soft and firm. "It's not about the uniform. It's about showing up when it matters." Spring arrived, painting the town with new light. Ray's Diner had become more than a place to eat. It had become a sanctuary. A former Navy cook now ran the kitchen. A Marine hosted weekend writing workshops in the back room. Every Wednesday, a retired Army nurse offered free mental health screenings. The honor wall stretched across 2 walls, then 3. And still, Raina showed up, day after day, boots planted, eyes watchful. One evening, she stood outside watching a group of teenagers photographing the bronze sidewalk plaque that bore her name. One whispered, awestruck, "You're her." Raina nodded, then said quietly, "So are you, if you choose to be." 6 months later, the final scene of the documentary was re-released as a short film. In it, Raina sat beside James on a weathered bench behind the diner. "Do you think people really change?" James asked. Raina looked toward the sky. "I think they remember who they were, before the world told them to forget." "And what if they don't remember?" She paused. "Then we remind them." Years passed, long after the last credits rolled and the cameras moved on. People still came. Some arrived with letters, others with silence. All left changed. And on the corner of Veterans Row, where once Rain had stood unseen, Blunt has seen a mural now stretched wide across the old brick wall. It showed a woman in uniform, scars visible and unapologetic, eyes steady and forward, a coffee pot in one hand, a medal in the other. Beneath it, 3 simple words: strength in stillness. The war had ended, but the mission had not. When the final chords of The Weight We Carry faded to silence, something heavier remained. Not just the echo of applause or the somber theme song, but the undeniable weight of recognition. The understanding that strength isn't always loud, that battles don't always end with ceasefires. Some are waged long after the last bullet is fired, in diners, on sidewalks, in courtrooms, and in the quiet chambers of our own hearts. Raina Jefferson had never set out to be a hero. She never chased headlines. Her scars were not invitations for pity. They were testimony to pain, to endurance, to service beyond survival. And when the world mocked her, tried to flatten her story into a stereotype or a joke, she did not answer with fury. She responded like the soldier she once was, with calculation, memory, precision. She remembered names, faces, words. And when the moment came, she moved, not to destroy, but to reveal, to reclaim, to remind. At our channel, we've always believed that the most powerful stories are not the loudest. They are the ones hiding in plain sight, of dignity rediscovered, silence broken with grace, and scars carried like medals. Not because of the pain endured, but because of the strength born from overcoming it. Raina's journey didn't end in a courtroom or with a viral video. It started there. Because this was never just about one waitress. It was about all of us, about the stories we carry, the assumptions we make, the people we overlook because they don't match the mold of who we think deserves respect. And about the moment when one person decides not to remain invisible and everything shifts. What if we chose to listen more closely? What if we saw scars not as shame but as symbols? What if we recognized that behind every silent worker, every dismissed face, there could be a whole universe of resilience waiting to be seen? And what if we measured greatness, not by titles or rank, but by how someone treats others when no one is watching? Raina's story may have found its final scene on screen, but its echo lingers still, and it will keep echoing wherever there is stillness, worn like armor. Veterans now speak openly about their wounds, some still healing, some etched deep within. A teenage girl, once timid and hidden beneath long sleeves, now walks into the world with her scars uncovered, no longer ashamed. Hiring managers in boardrooms are revisiting outdated policies, drafting new ones born from reflection and accountability. In classrooms across the country, students don't just study history. They listen to it, carried on the backs of the broken and brave. In countless modest diners, amid the clang of dishes and hum of small talk, someone makes a quiet choice to see the person standing in front of them, not as a stereotype, not as a shadow of who they were, but fully, presently, as they are. At the very end of the last episode, there's a fleeting frame most viewers miss. It's a still shot of Ray's diner after hours. The space is hushed, the lights turned low, the chairs turned upside down and stacked atop the tables. But behind the counter, one figure remains. Raina stands alone, gently drying a single ceramic coffee cup. She isn't performing, isn't giving a speech, she isn't posing for anyone's applause. She's simply there, breathing, steady, alive. And in that simple act, there's an unspoken message. The story hasn't ended. The fight continues, and so does she. To everyone who's followed this story from its raw, aching beginning to this final quiet moment, thank you. You've witnessed what justice looks like when it moves, not with thunder, but with persistence. You've seen how one woman made truth her guiding star, how she wielded empathy not as weakness, but as strength. Her resilience, quiet and steady as a heartbeat, has become a legacy. But let this be more than something you watched and admired. Let it be something you carry into your workplace where voices are often silenced, into your schools where stories can open minds, into your dinner conversations and your everyday decisions. Because Raina's strength doesn't belong to her alone. It was never meant to. It lives in anyone brave enough to reach for it. If you felt something watching her journey, if you paused, reflected, or saw yourself or someone you love in her, tell us where you are, what this meant to you. Share your own story, because it matters. And if you believe, truly believe, in the power of a single voice, a single act, a single scar transformed into strength, then stay. Subscribe. Stand with us. Because the next story might be yours and it deserves to be told.